Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me on Psyched with Setmire. Today we're going to look at lies. How do we detect a lie, or how do we spot a lie? There are certain things that people do in general when they are lying. And so we'll look a little bit at that. What are some of the little tells, if you will, that will give somebody away or kind of capture them in a lie. And then we'll also look a little bit briefly, just for fun, at the phrase liar, liar, pants on fire. Where did that come from? And what are the roots of it? So thank you for joining me today, and let's talk about lies. How do we know when somebody is lying? Alright, so how do we spot a lie? If it were only so simple, right, as your pants spontaneously lit on fire when you told a lie, or your nose grew by several inches like in Pinocchio, but sadly, it's not always that obvious. Some people are really, really talented liars, and they can lie without giving any signs whatsoever, and those are the really difficult ones to spot. But others give away very obvious signs that they're not telling the truth. And personally, I'm a pretty horrible liar. I giggle, I'm inconsistent, I smile, right? I'm not very good at pulling off lies, even about really simple things. But most people do kind of fall somewhere in the middle, and they might give away little tells to indicate that they are lying. So what are they? There's a bunch of them. One of them is a person who's lying will often avoid eye contact, or they might look away from you. So they might look up or down or to the side. There's a difference in eye contact. When a person lies, they might often touch some portion of their face. Really common for someone to touch their nose or their ears or their throat. They touch some element of their face, which might give them away. Other people might be off in the timing of their speed or their gestures. It might be a little bit different than their typical pace. So either slower or quicker than they might typically respond to you. People who are lying often giggle, laugh, or smile. That's really my problem when I try and lie. I giggle and laugh and smile. It gives me away every time. But that's a very common thing that you might see. Another thing is people sometimes get super defensive when they lie. Maybe more so than they might be on a typical basis. You might see people who are lying quickly change the subject, right? Trying to distract you or shift it away from the current focus. There's often inconsistencies in stories when people are lying. So if you were to ask them to tell their story again, it might not be exactly the same. So you might catch someone in a lie by having them repeat what they said to you. Another thing is you might ask something completely unexpected to catch someone on a lie. So if you ask them a question that kind of throws them off, they might stammer a little bit and be struggling to answer the question, and that might tip you off that they're lying. Another thing is you might look for insincere emotions or some kind of sense of unease or anxiety. If somebody isn't making eye contact and they're kind of acting off, maybe they're sweating or they look uneasy, that might indicate that they're lying to you. Or again, insincere emotions might be related to earlier giggling or laughing or smiling inappropriately. Watch for little micro expressions, a brief expression that's typically a concealed emotion. Again, this might be little twitches of the eyes or the face, or touching different elements of your face or your collar or your neck. Little tiny little micro expressions that might give somebody away. It might be a pitch change or excessive blinking. Their pupils might change. They might shrug their shoulders. Little things like that can indicate a lie. And people often provide way too many details when they're lying, like they've thought it through a little bit too well, right? They have details for things that aren't even important, which might distract you from the lie that they're trying to weave. There might be little speech hesitations, pausing, clearing their throat, little stalling methods that might indicate that they're lying. And finally, some people, when they lie, fidget or have other little body language tells that might give them away, again, like shrugging or fidgeting, or again, it might be touching certain parts of their face. So all these little things can help you to detect if somebody is lying. And if you know somebody well, you're going to know the things that they do when they lie, and that will even make it easier for you to tell when somebody is lying to you. So in review, there are just an absolute ton of ways to spot a lie if you know what to look for. Now, we obviously have things like polygraphs and formal lie detector tests, but they're not perfect either. They lie about a third of the time. So being a skilled interpreter of these little techniques to find for lies can actually help you quite a bit. And again, knowing the person that you're talking to will make it even easier for you to detect that they're lying. And I have a little side note for you before we end our little presentation here. As a side note, there's a very common phrase, and you've seen pictures of this throughout this little presentation, of liar, liar, pants on fire, hanging on a telephone wire, hanging from a telephone wire. A little expression that is usually chanted traditionally by children, right, to indicate that somebody is lying. Now, the roots of this phrase, if you've ever wondered why we say liar, liar, pants on fire, or sometimes adding the full phrase of hanging on a telephone wire, there's some pretty well debated origins. It's actually a little bit controversial. This phrase, or this saying, is commonly attributed to a poem that was thought to be written by William Blake called The Liar. But if you look into this more, there's actually no documented proof that he did, in fact, write this poem. So it's commonly kind of attributed to him or alleged that he possibly wrote it, but that hasn't been proven. But it's a very popular theory nonetheless. And I have the poem for you here called The Liar. Deceiver, dissembler, your trousers are alight. From what polar gallows shall they dangle in the night? When I asked of your career, what did you have to kick me in my rear, with that stinking lie of thine proclaiming that you owned a mine? When you asked to borrow my stallion to visit a nearby moored galleon, how could I ever know that you intended to turn him into glue? What red devil of mendacity grips your soul with such tenacity? Will one you cruelly shower with lies put a pistol ball between your eyes? What internal serpent has lent you his forked tongue? From what pit of foul deceit are all those whoppers sprung? Deceiver, dissembler, your trousers are alight. From what polar gallows do they dangle in the night? And so again, that was thought to possibly be something that was written by William Blake. And then there are lots of stories and little pieces of folklore. One of the most popular stories was a little story or a rhyme of a country boy who stole a cigar from his father. And he went out into the shed to smoke it, and when the father smelled the smoke, he came out to the shed to see what was going on, and when he opened the door, his son stuffed the cigar into his back pocket of his pants, feigned innocence, saying he was looking for something to go fishing with, and the cigar spontaneously lit on fire, right? It made his pants light on fire, and the father spotted the smoke and yelled, "Liar, liar, your pants are on fire." And then, spanked him and punished him and so on. And that's one other thought of where this little phrase might come from. So who knows, but just a couple of interesting theories. And I hope you found this interesting and that it helps you to tell when people in your life are lying to you. And again, now you know where that little phrase, liar, liar, pants on fire, comes from. So thanks for joining me, and I'll hope to see you again soon here on Psyched with Setmire.